Welcome back, everyone. Oz here, and today I've got some r/malicious compliance for you all. As per usual, I'll be reading you the post, giving you my opinions, and I hope you do the same down in the comments below. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Greens 051. Spotify support told me to read their refund policy, so I did, and forced them to give me a refund. So, my Spotify premium renewed today because I forgot to cancel. I immediately checked their refund policy online and confirmed I was eligible. So I canceled the plan, literally within minutes, and hopped on support chat to ask for the refund. Seems simple, right? Wrong. The agent, Christina, gave me the classic runaround. She said the 14-day refund period only applies to your initial sign-up, and since I've been a member for months, I was out of luck. She even sent me a link to the policy to prove her point, telling me to read it. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. I did exactly what she said. I read the policy, and then I went deeper and found their full, legally binding terms of use. And what did I find? In Section 3 under Withdrawal Right, it clearly states you have 14 days after your purchase to withdraw for any reason. A monthly renewal is a new purchase. My own research before the chat was correct. I went back to Christina and quoted the terms of use directly. She put me on hold to check backstage, then came back with the same denial. Her team was doubling down on the incorrect script. So I played my final card. I sent this message. Since this dispute is specifically about the legal interpretation of the withdrawal right, in your terms of use, could you please provide the contact information for Spotify's legal department or the appropriate office for handling formal contractual disputes? The change was instant. Suddenly, she had to see what she could do, and 5 minutes later, I've managed to ask some support with our backstage team. We can go ahead and process a refund for you. They folded like a cheap suit. Their business model counts on you giving up. Don't. You're entitled to your money back. Too long didn't read. Spotify support tried to deny my valid refund by misinterpreting their own policy. I read their legal terms of use as they suggested, cited it back to them, and when they still refused, I asked for their legal team's contact info. They immediately processed the refund. Don't let them push you around. Honestly, I'm not surprised this works with Spotify. I've actually been doing this with scam callers recently, and it has worked wonders. Telling them that you've been on the do not call list doesn't do shit anymore because they continue calling. So instead of reminding them that I'm on the federal do not contact list, instead I just simply ask for their contact information for their legal department because I've asked them numerous times to stop contacting me, and the amount of spam calls I've been getting has drastically fallen off. The amount of, "Sir, that won't be necessary, we'd be happy to take you off the call list," has been incredible. And just hearing them squirm when you insist upon contacting their legal team, oh god! Oh, I live for it now. I get excited for spam calls now. Their training doesn't cover that, but goddamn do they begin to panic, and it is lovely. Viking ZX. Landlord maliciously complianced themselves. This happened a few years ago, in my last apartment. My roommate and I were living in a basement place with upstairs neighbors, and the owner decided he wanted to sell. The upstairs neighbors ended up buying it, and became our new landlords. And they were awful at it. I could fill a whole post with the amount of stuff they tried to get away with, but we're here to talk about one particular instance. But suffice to say, they had no idea that landlords had responsibilities and simply saw us tenants as a source of income that should be ever growing. Hence our rents suddenly spiking and why we left. But there was one time they maliciously complianced themselves. See, they had a habit of trying to push stuff on us that was blatantly illegal. Their first contract, for example, said, among other things, that they had the right to enter the apartment at any time they wanted and could go through our stuff if they wished because we were living on their property. I pointed out that this was highly illegal, and they grew very upset, saying, "Well, we'll see about that." This clause later suddenly became the real one before we signed. One day, however, our lone fire alarm stopped working. As dutiful tenants, we reached out and said, "Hey, the fire alarm stopped working." Their response was a predictable sort of, "So what?" we need to have a working fire alarm," we replied. "And it's the landlord's duty to provide working fire alarms." "No, it's not. You want one? You get it." "The law says otherwise." And here's where they maliciously compliance themselves, possibly because they were getting tired of being corrected. They got snooty with this one. We got a very sarcastic response. "Oh, it does it? Well, we'll just see what the fire marshal has to say about that." Me and my roommate, upon receiving this message, burst out laughing, but they were serious. They thought they were going to contact the fire marshal. He was going to side with them, and then they could come down on us hard. I don't know what their expressions were when we said, "Okay, yeah, do that." However, the next morning there's frantic knocking at our door. There's the landlord and his family, looking very concerned with a bag of brand new fire alarms, one for each room and, if I remember correctly, even 2 spares. He begs to be let in outside of a 24-hour notice and says it's an emergency. He has to put these alarms up right now. Trying not to laugh, we let them in, and they hurriedly put one in every single room, apologizing profusely for the delay and telling us, "If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." I don't know how that meeting with the fire marshal went, or if they got him or someone else at their office, but their attitude painted a pretty clear picture of the ultimate result. They complied maliciously, thinking they'd called our bluff. Oops. User Wake Island Tango has an absolutely beautiful comment. "Fire marshals are only one small step below postal inspectors in terms of creatures you want to avoid at all costs." And user Muchbed6652 comments, "I could tell you roughly how that conversation went, even not knowing the details. They called and managed to reach a fire marshal. They acted like entitled assholes about fire safety. The marshal sternly corrected, pointed out the financial and criminal liability they could be under if not compliant, and heavily implied someone would be by to check in the 24-hour notice they would need to get it done. Now, whether the marshal ever intended to do anything is debatable, but it sure sounds like they got the point across." A fire marshal is someone who is very aware of what fire can do. Not only are they incredibly aware of what fire can do, but you bet your ass they are in the position that they will do anything they possibly can to make sure that kind of damage or harm happens to as few people as possible. And when an entitled landlord comes knocking on their door asking about what requirements they really have to follow when it comes to smoke detectors in the house, I know that they won't hesitate to lay down exactly what will happen and what they will do about it if it doesn't happen. Where's my gin? Do all the work yourself or get 0%. In high school, I was in science class that I did very well in. I was top of the class and scored nearly 100% on every test and assignment. The teacher assigned a big group project that would take about a week to complete with a team of 4 students. Groups were randomly assigned, and unfortunately, I was paired up with 3 kids who were barely passing the class. In class, we are given time to make plans together as a group to divide up work, examine the instructions, schedule times outside of school to meet up, etc. It was at this point my teammates decided to tell me that they weren't going to do any work on the project. I asked why, and they said they knew I really cared about my grades, so they figured I would do it on my own. They were so lazy, they were banking on the fact I wouldn't tank my own grade, so they could benefit off of my hard work when I inevitably got a good score on the project. I was pissed and said that was unfair. They dug in and said, "Too bad. Now you either do this project yourself or you'll get a 0. Cue malicious compliance." Now, I could have gone to the teacher and he probably would have sorted this out, but a better idea struck me. So I said, "Fine, you win. I'll do what you say." They smiled smugly and thought that was that. But you see, this teacher had a policy that at the end of the semester your lowest grade, excluding finals, would be taken off your record. So if you forgot to turn in an assignment or did really bad on one test, you got a mulligan, so it wouldn't ruin your final grade. I had never done poorly on an assignment all year, so I never needed my mulligan. However, I knew that these shitheads all did. If they got a big fat 0 on a crucial assignment, they would probably fail the class. So I did exactly as they instructed. I did no work on the project all week, just sat on it and bided my time. At the beginning of the next week, all of the students turned in their assignments. My team watched as I sat in my chair, unmoving. Finally, one said, classmate, "Hey, OP, aren't you gonna turn in the project?" "Oh, I didn't do the project." They were shocked and asked why the hell I didn't do it. "You said do all the work or get a 0. I chose the 0. They were all royally pissed. They all had to do credit recovery over the summer. They hated my guts, but I couldn't have cared less. It was the most satisfying failing grade in my entire life. This reminded me of a time when I was in uni and taking an EE course, and there was a small problem with 2 instructors in the electrical engineering college that had a different approach to teaching things. That approach being, one was from mainland China and the other was American. Now, if you're wondering what that problem is, when you grow up learning Mandarin, and that's your basis in your first language, your basis for binary is right to left, not left to right. So essentially, we had one entire group of kids learning to read binary right to left, and another group of kids learning to read binary left to right. And now when you're, dealing with students that are from the same class, that's not really a problem. But see, at the time that I was in university, they wanted both EE classes to be on the same page, so they structured the labs where you were paired as one student with another student from the other class. So that way everyone was on the same page, notes could be shared, and when you made it to the 200s, no one was left behind. That was the idea. The problem was when you got into the lab and started punching in your calculations and punching in your partner's calculations and then wondering what the fuck is going on. Yeah. Fingers start getting pointed at each other. And it took a little bit of time for us to figure out, oh, we're reading binary in different directions. That's kind of a problem. And yeah, just a bit of a goofy scenario where I honest to God felt like I was going crazy and my partner didn't know what the hell they were doing because their numbers are right on their screen, but when they were using my numbers, mine were incorrect. But when I was using my numbers on my screen, mine were right and theirs are wrong. And then we finally figured out what the problem was and things were all right. And yeah, just a bit of a goofy situation there. And this whole thing kind of reminded me of that because I thought my lab partner was honest to God trying to purposely fail the class. Joey Jojo Sr. Manager insisted we do timesheets after hours. At our work, timesheets have to be filled in every fortnight on a Friday by close of business, to be processed first thing Monday morning. Our manager was a really chill woman who would sign off on timesheets Friday morning and then send them to payroll before 5 p.m. She went on leave because her daughter was having a baby, and we got some young dude to temporarily fill in as manager. This guy was a total douchebag. One of the things he did was insist we complete timesheets only after we'd worked our fortnightly hours. This meant we had to work until 5, then get our timesheets signed, and then get them to payroll. Except payroll closes at 5, which meant we couldn't get our timesheets to payroll until Monday morning, and they'd be processed late. So we decided we'd take our time filling in timesheets. A lot of us hang around chatting on a Friday because there's a bar across the road that does cheap drinks 6 to 7 p.m. So we'd leisurely do our timesheets and D-Bag Manager would have to hang around to sign them all. One week, we didn't give them to him until right before 6 p.m. He was pissed. This lasted about 6 weeks. I guess something got flagged somewhere that our whole department wasn't getting paid on time. D-Bag Manager was quickly identified as the culprit and given the boot. They ended up getting one of my coworkers to take over until our real manager came back. OP would also go to confirm in the comments that the time they spent filling out their timesheets was in fact added to their timesheets and then approved as overtime. This is something we encounter pretty often on the channel, whether it's malicious compliance or coworker stories, where a new manager walks in, wants to shake things up and get some movers and shakers into position, and ends up fucking popping the tire and wonders what the hell is going on. If you're stepping into a new position, always see how the machine runs first before you start changing parts out, because last thing you want to do is be the person who takes the engine out of the car and wonders why it don't go no more. Illustrious Report 482. You want the server down during business hours? You got it. I used to work IT at a mid-sized logistics company. Our warehouse ran 24/7, but the corporate office was open Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I was responsible for maintaining the internal server that handled everything from payroll to inventory management to shipping labels. One Monday morning, I got an email from a higher-up, let's call her Karen, demanding that we take this server offline immediately for scheduled maintenance. Now, I had scheduled that maintenance for Sunday evening, sent out 3 notices, and got no objections. But Karen hadn't read those emails and was now insisting we do it right now, during her working hours. I replied, taking the server offline during business hours will temporarily halt access to the shipping system, inventory time tracking, and payroll processing. Confirm you'd like me to proceed. She replied, and I quote, yes, you should be working on my schedule. Get it done now. All right, malicious compliance time. I looped in the warehouse manager and let him know the system would be down per Karen's urgent request. Then I pulled the plug at exactly 10:30 a.m. Within 15 minutes, the office was in chaos. No one could clock in or out, print labels, track shipments, or even check inventory levels. Phones were ringing off the hook. The CFO stormed into my office asking what the hell was going on. I just showed him the email thread. Less than 30 minutes later, Karen came to my office red-faced and yelling. I calmly pointed out that she had approved the server downtime in writing despite warnings. I offered to restore access early, but reminded her it would take time to reboot and check for errors from the forced shutdown. Fallout? Oh, yes. She got dragged into a meeting with the COO and CTO that afternoon. From what I heard, it didn't go well for her. After that, all urgent IT requests from management had to go through a change management process with multiple approvals. I also got a little bonus on my next paycheck for handling the outage with professionalism. Sometimes the best way to teach someone why we have procedures is to let them break one. Once. As a general rule of thumb, and this is probably a good rule for life as well, if you ask someone to do something with something that you're usually unfamiliar with, and they respond asking for your confirmation in writing, maybe you should take their advice on what they would recommend in that situation. Normally that can imply that there's about to be a massive fuck-up that might occur, and they're just making sure their ass is covered. On another note, I was kind of wondering why the Karen would want to push maintenance so quickly, and the only guess that I could potentially have is that they saw that the server needed maintenance. They thought IT was slacking and delaying their job, and just thought like, well, I should probably kick IT into gear and make sure they're actually doing their job. So yeah, you guys should be doing your maintenance right now. And didn't realize just how catastrophic this would be. I'm also very concerned that you didn't check in with the CTO before cutting off the server singular, which is already like a massive red flag for your systems. There shouldn't just be one singular server. I realize you guys can't see my air quotes here. That's a bit unfortunate. But if this story is to be believed, I'm left kind of just in the position where the company just comes off as being completely incompetent. If the CTO's response to the IT admin pulling the plug on the entire system was to give them a pay bonus, like, congrats on pulling the wool over your CTO's eyes, because like, damn, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Pro friend zoner. Supervisor told me sarcastically to call the fire department. I did. I worked in retail in between jobs way back when, early 90s. Yeah, I'm old, get off my lawn. It was December, major department store that is no longer around. I know that doesn't narrow it down, I'm sorry. Anyways, they tried to cram as much product on the floor as possible, to the point that you couldn't walk through the aisles and had to twist and turn to get past the fixtures set up with product. I casually mentioned to a supervisor that if the fire department ever came in, they would close us down for the hazards and lack of egress. She was highly stressed and blurted out to me, "You know what? Then call the fire department." I held my hands up and said, "Easy." She assigned me my duties, and that was that. Well, she did tell me to call. On the way home, I stopped by a government building that had all sorts of agencies in it. Told the receptionist my plight, and she pointed to a phone on the wall. Tell the operator I want the fire department, and they would patch me through to the station's non-emergency line. The fire chief himself answered. I told him how crowded it was and what the supervisor said. He had a good laugh and said they'd check it out. I was off work the next day, but heard about it when I got back. Fire chief in station house full of firefighters show up to do an inspection. He tells the store manager that egress is being blocked and he'd have to remove a lot of the fixtures in the aisles. Store manager says he has orders from corporate. Fixtures stay. Fire chief assures him he will win the argument. Store manager stands his ground. Fire chief, all right, boys, close them down. They evacuated the store, all 3 levels, and closed all entrances. In December, prime Christmas shopping season. Although it wasn't a weekend day, it was during the week, but still. Store manager tried to protest, and suddenly the sheriff's department starts showing up. Long story short, they were closed for about 5.5 hours while the chief, store manager, and employees rearranged the store to acceptable levels. The supervisor never treated me differently, so I'm guessing she didn't remember the conversation. The store manager, surprisingly, did not get fired by corporate, but corporate was not happy. About a week later, I'm working with the store manager and supervisor when she asks why we can't do something a certain way. Store manager replied, "Fire department won't allow that," and that was it. I worked there a few more weeks before getting a job that almost got me killed in a workplace shooting, but that's a story for later. Edit 1. There are some videos on YouTube about postal shootings. One done by a woman, which is insane. Even the comments. The one I was in, the person was acting out for well over a year. Skeptic magazine had a great issue about mass shootings, I think from 2013. One study they talked about was how the mass shooters never snap, but act out for usually a year or longer before committing the act. Interesting stuff. Myself, as well as other employees, expressed concern to management about the behavior and potential for violence, but they said the employee was harmless. Didn't surprise a lot of us who it was when it happened. I could go on, but honestly most of you would think I'm lying. But I could corroborate every story. And the funny part is, other postal workers would snicker and say, "That's nothing. Let me tell you what happens at our facility." It is the most violent workplace in America, and also the most deadly. OP does specify in the comments that their next job was at a post office, and just wanted to clarify that, just in case if it wasn't super obvious. Considering the origin of the term going postal, yeah. Not surprised, unfortunately. Tragically, actually. So let's move on talking about the main part of the story now. I know that it was the 90s and there wasn't exactly a plethora of access to information or viral videos of people doing stupid things, but I still would hope to imagine that the idea of arguing or fucking with the fire department would be seen as a bad idea. But still, 90s or the 20s. The idea that someone would go, "Oh yeah, the orders from corporate, that's gonna supersede the fire department's directive." Of course, obviously. And then getting beef with the fire department? I mean, after all, you did instruct your employee to call the fire department. Also, just, from a standpoint of someone who grew up in, the early 2000s and seeing cell phones being prevalent and evolving into smartphones, the idea of not having a way to contact the outside world in your pocket and having to essentially hunt down, like, a landline phone or a payphone or something in order to actually get a phone call through is difficult to comprehend nowadays. I know there's a solid chunk of you in my audience who grew up in that era and that was just how it was. But it's something that, as we've grown, the idea of just call the fire department. A simple thought like that and trying to scale it back with time becomes a lot more complicated than just pulling your phone out and dialing 911. It used to be a whole fiasco of, fuck, I need to find a phone first. I don't know. I know that's a duh for a lot of people, but it is just kind of something interesting of how far we've progressed and how much things have actually just fundamentally evolved and changed. Cock-a-doodle-doo in my ass! That's what the username says. I don't know what you want from me. You want to fix our working hours? Our contracts have something to say about that. Early last year, we had a new manager take over the department. He previously had another IT department in Germany, but moved to Switzerland to take the role in ours. Our team is spread over Switzerland, Spain, and Mexico, with second line in Spain and Mexico, the third line in Switzerland and Spain. It was a few months before he started making changes, and they were mostly small. We had to record how much time we spent on tickets, provided weekly updates on our changes and projects, and our monthly department meeting became fortnightly. It meant a bit more bureaucracy here and there, but it was mostly fine. Nothing excessive. But about 6 months in, he made a change that none of us really liked. While Switzerland and Spain are both in the same time zone, in reality, our times don't really line up. Employees in Switzerland will start at any time between 7 o'clock and 8:30, while Spain can start later than 9. Lunch in Switzerland is often 11:30 to 12:30, while Spain will wait until 1300 or later. Home time in Switzerland ranges from 15:30 to 17:30, while the team in Spain will often be online until 1800. This means that meetings between the third-line teams usually take place between 9 o'clock to 11:30 and 1400 to 1600. An example, about 4.5 hours a day. Outside of those times, you risk people not having started yet, having already gone home, or being out for lunch. This is what our new manager didn't like. While he couldn't really do much about lunch times, he saw the opportunity to align our start and end times. After reviewing people's calendars, he determined that enforcing an 8 o'clock to 5 p.m. working day would cause the least amount of disruption to our schedules. This would increase the number of hours we were available by 2 per day or 10 per week. When he told us about the change, none of us were happy. Even those that wouldn't be impacted, because it already aligned with their usual start and finish times, were annoyed on behalf of those who would be impacted. When we asked why the change was being made, we were simply told it was about us all being online together more. Some people complained that it would impact out-of-work commitments, and we were told he would make allowances, but only temporarily. One guy said that he only takes a 30-minute lunch break, so this would mean he goes over his weekly hours. The manager said he would look into that. Then, an older member of the team asked if he had run it by HR. The manager said no, this isn't something he needs to run by HR. The same guy then asked if we would have to start recording our hours. The manager said no, this has nothing to do with recording hours. Turns out, the manager made a mistake here. You see, in Switzerland, by law, employees need to record their working hours and employers need to retain records to ensure compliance with labor laws. There are, however, a few exceptions. Smaller companies can simply record the number of hours worked each day. Meanwhile, senior employees can be exempt from logging their hours if they meet a certain salary threshold, and their role allows for autonomy in the hours worked. All the engineers on the team based in Switzerland had signed this waiver. It wasn't uncommon for us to work 11 hours on one day and then 5 hours on the next. It wasn't uncommon for us to work 30 hours in one week, then 50 hours the next. We never recorded these hours. We never explicitly told our team leaders or manager. It was simply understood that some days, or weeks, would be busy, and as we managed our own time, we would make up for it later. We were trusted to manage our own time, and if we didn't sign the waiver to exclude us from logging our hours, it would create a mess for overtime, time off in lieu, etc. But one of the conditions for signing this waiver was that we were free to determine the majority of our working hours, which courts had clarified was defined as 50%. If we are contracted to work 40 hours a week, then our employer can fix 20 of those hours, and we can choose when to take the other 20. The manager had now fixed 100% of our hours. We were no longer eligible for the exception granted to us. Real quick, I just want to butt in here. Why does Switzerland have such based labor laws? Like, this is sick as hell. Sorry, my American brain literally cannot comprehend fair working practices. For us, we could continue working the dictated hours, and legally, we would be fine. But if someone reported our employer to the government, the company could be fined and potentially be forced to log all employees' working hours, or lose the ability to file working time waivers, i.e., engineers couldn't work out of hours to perform maintenance and updates. The impact to the company could be huge. So the guy that asked the question went straight to HR and informed them of the manager's new policy. HR, recognizing the legal risk that such a policy could create for the company, went straight to the manager's director. The policy was put on hold later that day. On the Friday of the same week, another meeting was held. The manager apologized for not familiarizing himself with Swiss labor laws before implementing the policy and instead decided to implement a new one, which would be legally compliant. Spain would continue with the 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock working hours. For Switzerland, 50% of our working hours would be fixed, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock and 1500 to 1700. In short, that's 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, just to clarify that. In short, the first and last 2 hours of the day were fixed, and we'd have to fill in the rest with our free hours. It was dubious at best. I look at my calendar for Monday and see I have a meeting at 11 and another at 3. So I quickly ping a message to the 2 people on the 11 o'clock meeting. Then Monday comes around. At 6 o'clock, I log in and see the 2 other members of the team I'd spoken to on Friday are logged in from home. I drop them a message to say hi. Our plans are to work until 10 and then log off until 11 when we have a meeting together with some of the team in Spain. Take lunch from 11:30 to 1:30, then finish at 5. 2 people arrive in the office at 7, having planned to take a 2-hour lunch break in the city. The rest of the team based in Switzerland, another 4 people, logged in at 8 o'clock and quickly hear what the other half of the team were doing. One was working from home, so wanted to be done as soon as possible, and one had an appointment at 5:30, so had to stick to the manager's implied schedule. But the other 2 that were in the office had free time that evening. At 11:30 they left the office, returning just before 3, having spent the afternoon on a boat sailing around Lake Zurich. At 5, they both left the office and clocked up the rest of their hours working from home. On Tuesday, the fixed hours from the teams in both Switzerland and Spain were scrapped. The manager left the department a few months later. God, I am so envious of European labor laws. Also, this is a weird circumstance where the manager did look to see how everything operated, to see how the machine ran, and then still decided to make stupid changes. You've been in the position for 6 months? And you didn't even bother to familiarize yourself with the working laws before making a massive decision? Buddy, you're just signing yourself up for the employees to hate you. I also just opted real quick out of curiosity to look up Switzerland's work satisfaction and productivity rate. They vastly eclipse America in just how satisfied and how productive each worker is. Crazy. Implementing laws that actually respect your employees' times and interest and don't completely take over them to fuck them over actually results in employees being not only more productive but happier in their day-to-day life? Crazy. Don't forget, this is brought to you by GamerSupps. Use code OZ at checkout. It's basically a caffeine powder that you put in your water, and I actually really like it. I use this on a daily basis. Don't forget that every purchase you make using code OZ directly supports the channel. And if you want a personal recommendation from me, I would either recommend the Soda Pressing Pear or Dragon Fruit Punch. Those 2 are currently my favorite flavors. And as a note, once we sell a certain amount of stuff, I get my own flavor and my own cup, and you all know I'm gonna choose some degenerate shit that's gonna make their PR team squirm. My goal is to make them regret partnering with me. So please, use code OZ at checkout to make my dream come true of making a PR team squirm.